morning. We are opening the meeting with the flag salute. All face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we start with the general public comment period. That only involves comments that don't have anything to do with the agenda items. So I will look at the assembled seats and ask if there's any public comment. There being none, we'll move on to the consent agenda, which the only thing on the consent agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes for the meeting of December 12th, 2019. Are there any corrections to that?
No.
All right, and I have a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve the previous minutes.
A second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Minutes are approved. So on the regular agenda, we have one item, extension of time for project 2015-07, I'll put on my glasses, 8, tentative parcel map for Catherine Powell. So Scott, you're going to present this?
All right. As you said, this is a request for a 2-year extension of time to extend the expiration date of approved tentative parcel map 2015-078 for Catherine Powell. The subject property is located at 10704 Highway 49 in McCullamy Hill. It's just this side of the McCullamy River Bridge. In 2016, the Planning Commission approved a tentative parcel map for Catherine Powell to divide her 15.75 acre parcel into 2 parcels, just over 5 acres and 10 acres in size. The map was conditionally approved for 36 months, leaving it to expire in 2019. Nearing expiration, all the conditions necessary to record the map were not yet completed. Due to this, Mrs. Powell submitted a request for a 2-year extension of time. In order for this map to remain active and eligible for recordation, an extension must be approved. As explained in my staff report, unlike a tentative subdivision tract map, no specific findings are required to approve an extension of time for a tentative parcel map. However, a good faith effort often is used to persuade the Planning Commission to approve a request. A good faith effort to record TPM 2015-078, in the opinion of staff, has been demonstrated by Mrs. Powell. Many project conditions are either in process or have been completed, showing that she is committed to recording this map. Mrs. Powell is hoping to record this map as soon as possible, but does recognize that it may take over a year beyond the original expiration date and is therefore asking for a 2-year extension. Planning staff has no objections to Mrs. Powell's request for a 2-year extension and recommends that the Planning Commission adopt Resolution 2020-01 approving a 2-year extension of time based upon the findings included therein.
Any questions for the staff?
Yes, the staff report in the draft resolution refers to the county code that grants the Planning Commission the ability to extend the expiration of a parcel map for a period up to 5 years. Isn't there a state law that provides that the extension can be up to 6 years?
Yes, it does.
So would it be wise to change the resolution where to be approved to reflect that?
Well, the county code does say 5. I think it'd be wiser to change the code, honestly.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
Well, you could just not reference the county code and simply say that the government code grants the ability to extend a map for 6 years,
That is true.
which would be accurate, correct?
All right. That is correct. I could make that change.
Any other questions for staff? Then we'll hear from the applicant. You have 15 minutes.
Good morning, I'm Robin Peters with Cal State Engineering in Jackson. I represent the applicant this morning. The staff report is quite accurate. There were initially 26 conditions, and I did a count. Of those 26, 15 of those are either complete or are advisory in nature. 8 won't apply, as it turns out, because of some reconfigurations in the map that we've been working with the Public Works Department on. So really, there are 3 remaining conditions that haven't been completed. The big one really is drilling a well. We have Brisky retained to drill the well, but they can't get up there because of the weather, so as soon as the weather allows it in the spring, we'll get up there and drill that well, and we fully expect to have the map recorded by this time next year, perhaps by the end of the summer. We'll just see how it goes, but that's really the only physical condition that hasn't been met. The rest of them are mapping conditions, really. Drainage study, road maintenance agreement, things like that. Other than that, we're pretty much done with the conditions.
And you're not aware of any environmental changes or anything since the original action of the county on this?
No, certainly not. We've worked with environmental health on the septic system. We've got all that taken care of. Environmentally, the site really hasn't changed since our original application, so we just need a bit more time to complete the map.
Any further questions for the applicant?
Thank you.
All right. Is there any opposition to this question? There being none, I assume you have no rebuttal. Do you want to present the resolution?
All right. I, get my wording correct here. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt Resolution 2021-01 as amended, approving a 2-year extension of time for tentative parcel map 2015-078 for Catherine Powell.
And what is the amendment?
Changing the code reference to the government code that allows for a 6-year extension. And item 1 on the...
Any other proposed changes? I'd suggest that we just need to, on the last whereas, take out the words in writing and at the meeting, since we didn't have any written testimony presented at the meeting.
Okay.
Correct the date. The hearing was on the 23rd, not the 9th.
Well,
We'd continued this previously when we decided
Yeah.
that we didn't need to hold the hearing.
Okay.
Just for the record, on the resolution with number 1, it would be the government code. I don't remember. I think it's 66452.6, but I'm not exactly sure if that's it. We should probably change it to grants the county the ability, because the government code doesn't specifically state that the planning commission is the approving authority. So just make sure the record's clear.
Any other comments or questions from the commission? And do I have a motion on the resolution?
I move to approve it as amended.
A second?
A second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. You have your 2 years.
So this action is final unless appealed to the Board of Supervisors. I'm sure it's so controversial that's going to happen. So within 15 calendar days.
So we've had more than a month since we met last, and so there must be a plethora of commissioner reports. What all?
Not for me.
Not from you, okay.
I have none.
Neither do I. Planning director reports?
Yes, I do actually have something to
Good.
report. First of all, I can't remember When was the last time we had a meeting? Was it November or December?
I think we had one in December.
Yeah. So we are in the midst of litigation on 3 issues that have been before you, the gun club and the Tom Tryon issue. Mr. Tryon has sued the county on that. We're working on that. We are working with outside counsel on the cannabis ordinance CEQA lawsuit, as well as the general plan CEQA lawsuit. And that's just in process. We're working on the early stages of that right now.
On each of those, there's just one plaintiff or one set of plaintiffs? We only have one
Yes.
lawsuit in each of them?
Right, that's correct. Tuesday, we had a study session with the board on general plan implementation. And the board had established what they felt were the priorities that they wanted to see us focus on. I just wanted to sort of briefly go over those just to keep you guys appraised of that. And these are in no specific order. We have already started on working on a county-wide zoning map update to bring the zoning into conformance with the general plan. So that's something that I felt was very critical and necessary so we don't create conflicts. The board also direct us to start a comprehensive zoning ordinance update. So we'll be looking at, the entire code, trying to bring it into conformity with, some of the inconsistencies that we have, modernize it somewhat, make it a little more functional and usable. That's going to be a lengthy task, and so there are a few key issues that the board wanted us to focus on sort of while we're working on the comprehensive update, specifically special event provisions in the code, vacation rentals, and clarifying some of the inconsistencies that are there. For example, terms that are used in the code but not defined, and other where we have one portion of the code that says one thing and another section that says the opposite. So we'll be sort of going through that initially to try to identify those sort of immediate fixes that need to be made while we're working on the full update. That's going to be a lengthy process. In some ways, it may be even more challenging than the general plan itself. The policy issues will have been resolved, but then it's like, how do we craft this? How challenging it's been to some of these ordinances we've worked on, and what does that language really mean? And so it's going to be a more technical task. And there's going to be some policy discussion in there. How do we implement this program? How do we, what does this really mean? So that's something that we'll be working on for some time. We're going to get going on trying to finalize the Valley Springs community plan and sort of reactivate the Copperopolis community plan. So those are 2 things that the board wanted us to see, and those would be incorporated into the community planning element of the general plan. A couple of the mitigation measures that were identified in the general plan EIR were the greenhouse gas baseline and sort of an action plan following that. Oak woodland mitigation program and the resource production conversion mitigation program. So these are things that we said we were going to do that was somewhat controversial during the hearing process of how far do we go. So these will be projects that will we'll have to reach out to stakeholders and figure out how this is going to be working. It'll take some time to do that, but we want to get started on that. What's really important about this is it's beneficial to both the environmental community that wants to see these resources protected, as well as the development community that wants to have some type of surety as to how we move forward with the project. I got oaks on my property, I want to develop it, what do I need to do? And so we can have a program that's in place that allows them to move forward and calculate that into their decisions on whether or not to move forward with the development project. We also want to look at developing an infill database and incentives to promote infill and more compact development. That was sort of a key tenet of the plan, that we want to focus our development around our existing communities to enhance those. So what can we do to promote that type of development? So that's something the board wanted us to move forward with. And then there are a couple of small ones that Public Works will be working on, an update to the BRIM and benefit basin fees, as well as traffic impact study guidelines, so that a developer that is going to create some traffic, knows what they need to do to hire a consultant to perform that kind of analysis, so we can make our CEQA determination and determine what improvements are necessary to accommodate that new development. So that's sort of my marching orders for the next year or so. And we'll be working on, a development, a program to how do we move these things forward. I'm still working on a work program right now to say, okay, what are the costs of these? I know, for example, the greenhouse gas baseline is I'm working with the Calaveras Council of Governments. They will be applying for they call it the Strategic Growth Council grant program to pay for that initial analysis. So we're looking at different, grant programs and resources that we can utilize, as well as budgeting for next year. So that'll all be sort of coming up in the next few months. I'll be working on those programs to figure out how we're going to move forward with that, how we're going to pay for it, what kind of staffing I need, what kind of outside consultants will be necessary. So got my work cut out for me.
Speaking of grants, what's the status of the San Andreas reconfiguration plan that we?
So that was adopted, 2 years ago, I believe now,
Probably.
And I know that there are a couple of improvement projects that the COG and Public Works and Caltrans are working on to, sort of some incremental steps on that. We're also close to getting a final draft of a similar project in Valley Springs, Valley Springs, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's really focusing around the school and how do we sort of solve that problem of the traffic that's generated at the school when pickup time and drop-off is occurring, as well as looking at more interconnection within the community itself.
So the San Andreas is kind of going in component by component.
These plans, I said, here's the big picture of what we want to do. And that puts us in a position to apply for grant funding and for the standard transportation funding. There are so many different funding sources for transportation projects. It's an alphabet soup of different programs funded by the federal government, by the state government, as well as our own county funds to pay for different road projects. And the money goes from the feds to the state to the regional transportation planning agency, which is the COG. And then, we decide how to, share that between the county and the city. And so as there's RTIP and all these are various, programs that are used for different types of road projects. And we identify, here's sort of the priorities. And so the Public Works Department, working with the COG as well as the city's Public Works Department, here are the road projects we want to try to build over the next, 5 years. We have a 5-year capital improvement plan. Which of those qualify for different funding sources? Which ones are purely local funded? Which ones qualify for different state funding? If it's on the state highway, Caltrans gets involved. And so there's a lot of procedural issues to get a road project going and funded. And so by having these plans, we can say, well, we know this is what we want to do. And that helps us in our grant funding or our applications for funding. And so I know that there are a couple, I don't remember exactly which ones, but there's, I know an improvement down by the high school. Part of the plan included out here in front the Mountain Ranch Road improvements. And I think that's supposed to happen within the next year or two. We're supposed to get started on that. So in the reconfiguration of Pope Street and Mountain Ranch Road, where you've got that funny sort of triangular intersection, and it's going to come in as a T and be more of a regular intersection. Put in some sidewalks to allow for pedestrian access between Highway 49 in here, so those things are moving forward.
Yeah, when you say it's getting started within the next year, is that getting started with the funding or getting pavement on the ground?
Don't quote me on this, but I think that actual construction activity may be started on that.
Yeah, great.
So there are some projects in the works. It just, the road project procedure is convoluted and lengthy.
All right,
That's all I have unless there's any questions.
all right. There being none, this meeting is adjourned. Oh, yeah. Right.